The scent of burnt oil and old upholstery clung to my hands, a phantom reminder of the '69 Mustang I'd spent every spare hour and dollar wrenching on since I was 16. I wasn't just a car, it was my ticket. To college, to freedom, to proving I was capable of something outside my father's shadow. A rusty, temperamental symbol of self-reliance. That symbol was gone. My father, Arthur, stood in the sterile, air-conditioned living room, a space that always felt more like a museum than a home. He wasn't loud, his cruelty was subtler, a cold, surgical precision. He held up a plastic-coated bus pass, its bright blue color a jarring contrast to the grim situation. "I've done this for your own good, Alex," he stated, his voice the smooth, resonant baritone of a CEO who always got his way. "That car was a distraction. It was indulging your hobby." He said the word hobby, as if it were a synonym for waste of time. "You need to focus on what matters." Responsibility. My breath hitched, the humiliation scalding my throat. Responsibility. "Dad, I paid for that car. I rebuilt that engine. You sold it without asking." I managed, my voice shaking despite my desperate attempt to keep it steady. The air felt thin, toxic. He didn't flinch. He just delivered the line I knew was coming, the one that dismissed years of work and sacrifice. "It was under my roof, Alex. It was my property to liquidate. Now, you'll take the bus, you'll focus on your applications, and you'll learn the value of delayed gratification." He tapped the bus pass with a perfectly manicured finger, a smirk playing on the edge of his mouth. The telltale smirk that said, "I win, and you are powerless." "The money," he explained, "was in an account for future investment, a buffer against my immaturity." He made it sound like a blessing, a masterful paternal intervention. But deep down I knew it was a theft, sanctioned by blood and law. It wasn't just the $15,000 the car was worth. It was the theft of my autonomy. I looked around the room. My older brother Michael sat slouched on the expensive Italian leather sofa, scrolling disinterestedly on his phone. Michael, the golden child. Michael, who floated through life on a stream of financial handouts and casual praise. Michael, whose latest business idea, a vague crypto venture, had already bled Dad dry of several $1,000s with no consequence. He hadn't even looked up when I walked in. He just gave a slight, almost imperceptible scoff when Dad mentioned my high maturity. The silence from him was a deeper cut than Dad's words. The rest of the week was a blur of exhausting commutes and quiet rage. Every morning, waiting for the bus, I felt the sharp, public sting of my father's lesson. He'd successfully isolated me, taking away my means to work extra shifts to see my friends, to escape the crushing atmosphere of his control. One evening, I returned home exhausted, finding the house strangely emptied. I went upstairs, drawn by a careless, rhythmic clicking sound coming from Michael's locked home office. He was always meticulous about privacy, but tonight the door was ajar, pulled slightly open by its heavy weight. Curiosity, sharp and poisonous, overwhelmed my shame. I pushed the door gently. Michael was gone, probably on a run, but his laptop was open on his desk. He'd clearly been in a hurry, not logging out. The screen showed an open email thread with a subject line that made my heart hammer against my ribs. Mustang sale funds deposit. I stepped inside, my hands clammy. The email was a confirmation from an investment broker. It detailed a recent, large deposit into an account named Michael Aid. Vance Business Seed Fund. The amount was suspiciously close to the car's sales price, but the real gut punch was the email from my father, attached below the confirmation. It read, "Michael, this should cover the initial cost of the software license and that rental fee you were worried about. You need the capital more than Alex needs a noisy toy. He's too focused on the mechanics of things to understand the true value of money and entrepreneurial spirit. Consider this an advance on your trust. Let's not mention this to your brother, of course." Dad, the words didn't just expose the lie, they delivered a deep, personal insult. Nosy toy. Too focused on the mechanics. He hadn't just stolen the card. He judged my passion, my competence, and my future, finding all of it unworthy of investment. He hadn't taught me responsibility, he had taught me the brutal reality of favoritism. The tough love was a fast ad for financial favoritism toward his golden son. I backed out of the room, the door clicking shut behind me, not with a bang, but a quiet, awful finality. My anger didn't explode, it calcified into a cold, hard stone in my chest. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. The humiliation was gone, replaced by a steeled, terrifying resolve. The father I thought I knew. The fair, if strict, patriarch was an illusion. He had made his choice, and he had armed me with the truth. I walked down the stairs not as a humiliated victim, but as a person who had just been given the blueprint to a betrayal. I stopped at the foot of the stairs, looking at the pristine white marble floor, and made a silent vow. They wanted me to learn the value of money. Fine. They wanted me to be responsible for myself. Done. But I wouldn't stop there. I would not just succeed, I would find a way to make the cost of that noisy toy feel like the most expensive mistake Arthur Vance had ever made. The lesson wasn't about the car or the money. The lesson was about revenge, and I had just been fully educated. The knowledge was a physical weight, cold and heavy in my gut, yet strangely empowering. For the next few weeks, I played the part of the chastised, newly responsible son perfectly. I kept my mouth shut, took the bus, and even managed a meek, "Thank you for the lesson, Dad," during Sunday dinner, watching his self-satisfied nod from across the mahogany table. It was a performance of obedience, the necessary camouflage for the war I was quietly starting. My introspection was relentless. Every time Michael bragged, casually mentioning the seed capital for his ill-defined crypto venture or the rental advance that conveniently matched the Mustang's value, I felt a white-hot spark of resolve. They thought I was naive, that my love for mechanics meant I couldn't grasp the dynamics of finance or strategy. This was their greatest miscalculation. I stopped mourning the car and started analyzing the transaction itself. I spent late nights devouring documents on asset liquidation, tax law, and small business investment strategies. The official story was that the money was sitting in an inaccessible future investment account for me. I needed to know the exact nature of this account and, crucially, how long it would take for their favoritism to backfire. One Saturday morning, while Dad was at his weekly golf game and Michael was allegedly networking, I executed a small surgical maneuver. I knew the general password structure Dad used for non-critical accounts. With trembling hands, I accessed his personal financial dashboard on the home desktop. The revelation was deeper than I first realized. The Mustang's money hadn't just been gifted to Michael. It had been laundered through a temporary Alex Vance Educational Fund, a shell account that existed just long enough for Dad to write a transfer memo to Michael's business fund, legally disguising the car's sale as a parental loan to a business venture. The educational fund was now nearly empty, a blatant paper trail proving the theft was premeditated, legally disguised. But the most critical escalation wasn't the discovery of the financial sleight of hand, it was the realization of Michael's complicity. Scrolling through the email thread I'd seen before, I found replies from Michael. He wasn't just a passive recipient of Dad's favoritism, he was encouraging it. One email was particularly damning, sent the day after the car sale. "Smart move, Dad. He'll forget about the clunker once he's grinding at a minimum wage job. This capital infusion guarantees I'll be able to launch before the quarter ends. Thanks for prioritizing the real legacy." The word clunker ignited a silent explosion of fury. My brother, my own flesh and blood, had actively participated in my humiliation and minimized years of my honest, hard work. It was no longer just about the money or the car, it was about the deliberate crushing of my spirit by the two most important men in my life. My immediate impulse was to print every document, storm the golf course, and scream the truth into my father's privileged face. But the new, cold part of my brain stopped me. If I exposed it now, they would simply manipulate and cut me off entirely. I had no leverage, only the moral high ground, which meant nothing to them. I logged out cleanly, leaving no trace. I looked out the window at the empty driveway where my Mustang used to sit. The rising tension solidified into a single, unbreakable strategy. I would not confront them with the truth. I would use the truth to build a fortress of success so undeniable that when I eventually revealed their treachery, the damage would be exponentially greater than just a ruined reputation. I was done being the project. Now, I was the planner. The waiting game had begun. I retreated, not physically, but emotionally and strategically. I maintained my facade of the quietly brooding, newly responsible son, enduring the bus commutes and the subtle patronizing comments, but every moment of perceived humiliation was fueled. I didn't waste time looking for a minimum wage job. I used the 8 months following the betrayal to execute a calculated pivot. My technical skills, the ones Michael called mechanics, became my sword. I liquidated the small savings I had left from odd jobs and invested it in certification courses for high-demand specialized software and industrial diagnostics. Since my father thought I was too focused on the how, rather than the why, of business, I decided to become the absolute best at the how, making my expertise indispensable. I became obsessive, pulling all-nighters in the library, replacing my old friends with forums of seasoned engineers and developers. I stopped attending family dinners, citing intensive study, which pleased my father. He saw it as the delayed gratification he'd forced upon me. Michael, meanwhile, was experiencing predictable turbulence. His crypto venture was failing. The initial capital, my car's money, rapidly depleting on unnecessary office space and inflated titles. The turning point came not in a shout, but in a whisper. I had landed a high-paying, remote contract doing advanced systems diagnostics for a specialized engineering firm. A field so niche it was recession-proof. It paid more than Dad thought was possible for someone my age. This success, however, needed to remain a secret. One rainy Friday evening, Michael approached me in the kitchen. He looked drawn, his usual smugness replaced by a desperate anxiety. "Hey, Alex," he said, his voice surprisingly soft. "Listen, that venture, it's hitting a snag, just short on cash flow. I need about 10 grand to cover payroll before the deadline. Dad's cutting me off until I show real traction." He paused, then delivered the ultimate insult, dripping with hypocrisy. "You're a technical guy, smart with details. Can you loan me the money? We're family. You'd be investing in the real future of the family. I'll pay you back, with interest." I looked directly at him, the rage I'd suppressed for months finally channeling into a devastating calmness. I was holding a coffee mug, and I set it down deliberately, slowly, watching his hopeful expression. "You want me to invest in the real future of the family?" I repeated, letting the mockery hang in the air. "The last time my money was invested in your future, Michael, it bought you a rental advance and left me waiting for a bus. Do you remember the Mustang, or was that just a clunker?" His face flushed a deep, uncomfortable red, the mask completely shattered. "What are you talking about? That was Dad's money! A lesson!" "You weren't ready for that kind of responsibility," he stammered, his eyes darting toward the door. I leaned in, my voice low and venomous. "I saw the emails, Michael. I know the educational fund was emptied into your seed fund. I know you called my years of work a clunker. And I know Dad was complicit. You stole my property and my future to fund your failure." The air thickened, suffocating him. He sputtered, trying to form a defense, but I cut him off. "The difference between you and me, Michael, is that when I was taught responsibility, I didn't beg for handouts. I built something from the ground up, something that works. So here's the lesson for you," I said, delivering the crushing blow. "No, I won't give you a dime. You already spent my capital. The price of that Mustang just went up, and you can't afford it." I walked away, leaving him frozen in the kitchen, stripped bare of his privilege and his lie. The confrontation wasn't loud, but it was absolute. My hand didn't shake. The stone in my chest finally felt warm. It was the warmth of victory, the true cost of their betrayal. I had successfully turned their humiliation into my first step toward irreversible empowerment. The silence from Michael was immediate, but the reverberations started almost instantly. He didn't come to dinner that night, nor the next. My father, Arthur, sensing a rift, cornered me in his study, expecting the easy submission he'd always received. "What did you say to your brother?" he demanded, his voice edged with paternal authority that was quickly losing its potency on me. "He's distracted, upset. His focus should be on raising capital, not petty squabbles." I maintained eye contact, calm and steadied. "I simply told him the truth, Dad. That the money he asked me for was my own, and I wasn't going to fund his failure after he colluded with you to steal from me." Arthur's face went rigid. "Steal? That's an outrageous accusation. It was a lesson in responsibility. That money is sitting in a corporate investment buffer. You'll get it back, eventually." The desperation in his voice was new, a crack in his polished armor. The Alex Vance Educational Fund was emptied into the Michael Vance Seed Fund 8 months ago. I countered, my voice flat, devoid of emotion. "I saw the transfer emails, Dad. And I saw the email where Michael called my Mustang a clunker. Don't insult my intelligence by repeating the lie. The lesson wasn't responsibility, it was that you'd sacrifice my future to prop up his." The confrontation ended abruptly, not with a shout, but with Arthur staring at me, seeing a stranger where his controllable son used to be. He realized he had lost control of the narrative, and more terrifyingly for him, he had armed me with irrefutable proof of his favoritism and dishonesty. The fallout was swift and public. Michael's venture failed spectacularly a week later, not because of my refusal, but because the foundation of the business was always based on his entitlement, not actual merit. The failure wasn't silent, it made local business news. The kind that embarrasses prominent families like ours. The real emotional toll came during Thanksgiving dinner. The extended family, aunts, uncles, cousins, were present, all aware of Michael's public failure. The atmosphere was thick with forced cheer and awkward silences. Arthur, desperate to reassert his authority, started praising Michael's tenacity and entrepreneurial spirit, trying to spin the failure as a temporary setback. That's when an uncle, a quiet but respected CPA, looked at Arthur and asked pointedly, "Arthur, I heard some rumors about the initial funding. Did Michael really start his business with the money Alex was saving for his mechanics certification?" The question hung in the air, a grenade thrown into the perfect holiday tableau. Arthur's attempt to deny it was weak, overshadowed by Michael's panicked glare and stammering. I seized the moment, not with anger, but with cool, surgical precision. "It's true, uncle," I confirmed softly, letting the weight of my words crush the lie. "My father sold my car, claimed it was a lesson, and transferred the proceeds directly to Michael, who then wasted it. They both knowingly sacrificed my education to fund a venture that they knew was risky." The ensuing silence was deafening. The room fractured. Cousins exchanged horrified looks. Aunts whispered into their hands. Arthur looked physically ill, his carefully constructed reputation crumbling in front of his entire family. He had faced consequences in the boardroom, but never this devastating, public loss of respect. He had alienated the only person who had the work ethic to actually salvage his legacy. I stood up from the table, my plate untouched. The food had lost its appeal, replaced by the nourishment of justice. "I wish you all a good holiday," I said, pulling on my jacket. "I've finished my dinner, I have work to do." As I walked out the door, leaving behind the wreckage of their perfect family illusion, I heard the door of the study slam upstairs. Arthur retreating, defeated. I realized that my own financial independence had already been achieved. The real payoff was the public shattering of their moral authority. I was truly free, standing outside the door, ready to face the world, a world I was already conquering, without their toxic influence. The final act of my revenge wasn't a single dramatic moment. It was a slow, calculated demolition of their power structure, built upon the solid foundation of my own, hard-won success. After the Thanksgiving incident, I officially moved out, putting distance between me and the toxicity. I didn't need to yell anymore. My silence and my absence were the loudest statements. My remote engineering contract quickly blossomed into a full-time, high-salaried position. I used the money not for frivolous luxury, but to invest with the meticulous care my father claimed I lacked. I studied the local property market, focusing on specific commercial real estate near my father's aging office building. Meanwhile, Arthur Vance's business, a mid-sized financial consulting firm, began to stagnate. He had always relied on his reputation and personal relationships rather than innovation. With his golden child, Michael, having publicly crashed and burned, and with the silent but pervasive knowledge among relatives that Arthur was a dishonest, hypocritical patriarch, his network began to fray. Clients started looking for younger, less scandal-prone firms. The ultimate retribution unfolded 2 years after I had taken that first humiliating bus ride. I had quietly established my own boutique consulting firm, specializing in the exact kind of computational diagnostics that Arthur's clients were starting to require. My firm, Vance Systems, was incorporated not under my own name, but under a holding company, completely obfuscating my involvement. Arthur, facing a significant loss of market share, desperately needed new office space, a cheaper, more modern location to appear solvent. Through my holding company, I purchased the prime commercial building he was trying to secure, outbetting him by a narrow, calculated margin. He called me the next day, a desperate tremor in his voice. He didn't ask for forgiveness, he asked for help. "Alex, I need to talk to you about the Evergreen Plaza lease. This is vital to the business. I know you're doing well. Could you put in a good word with the owners for me? They're being difficult." I let him twist for a moment, savoring the sound of his genuine need. "I know the owners very well, Dad. I finally replied, my voice calm, the kind of professional drone he used to affect. In fact, I am the owner. The resulting silence was not just shock, it was the sound of his world collapsing. The Mustang was worth dar 15,000, I explained clinically. The lesson you taught me allowed me to forego college debt, start my own business, and structure a real estate deal that acquired that entire building. Your order 15,000 lie bought me millions. You taught me the value of money, its leverage, and I learned to use it against incompetence. His plea dissolved into a choked whisper. What do you want, Alex? I want nothing from you, I said, delivering the final, liberating sentence. You said I needed to be responsible for myself. I am. And as the responsible owner of that property, your firm's lease renewal has been denied. You have 90 days to vacate. Consider this my final lesson. I hung up the phone. I hadn't destroyed him. I had simply removed his safety net and allowed the natural consequences of his dishonesty and favoritism to take hold. I walked to the window of my new, high-rise office. An office I chose specifically because its view didn't include his company building. I had my freedom, my fortune, and my integrity. The Mustang was gone, but I had bought a new one, a classic I'd built myself, sitting proudly in my reserved parking spot. It wasn't about the car anymore. It was about the fact that this time, no one could ever take it away. I was finally responsible for everything.